Well, as we continue from our last week's conversation around the state of human rights in Uganda, today shall also spare some time to look at the governance issues that are emerging in our neighbor state here in Kenya, but also in the Republic of South Africa. We know that the president of Kenya, William Ruto, has ever since then suspended 4 commissioners of the IEBC. So we shall examine what does this mean for their democracy moving forward. But also, President Cyril Ramaphosa continues to face challenges around, of course, corruption and misuse of public office. Well, that and much more on this episode of the Citizens Chat Show. I'm joined by a panel of 2 distinguished citizens, but also we expect much more to join us along the way. Among those is hopefully we shall get in touch with Afande Lieutenant Deo Akiki, who is the deputy spokesperson of the Lieutenant Colonel.
Yes.
Sorry, you know those titles are very important. Yeah. So we expect them to join us along the way, but for now I'm joined by Dr. Sarah Bireete. Sarah is the Executive Director of Center for Constitutional Governance. Sarah, many thanks for being here.
Thanks, Moses, and glad to be back. I've been away for
yeah, we
2 or 3 shows.
Yeah. Yeah, we had missed you for sure. Yes, and the second is Dr. Adrian Jjuko, who is the Executive Director of Human Rights and Promotion Forum in Uganda.
Human Rights Awareness and Promotion Forum.
Right.
Yes. Thank you so much, Moses, for having me. And I'm glad to be here. It's my first time.
Yeah.
So I hope
yeah. All right.
it goes all well. Yeah.
Here, we are very kind to our guests, and we shall just begin with you. So in your research around human rights, before we delve into the governance issues,
Right.
what do your reports indicate? We know that, for example, there was a conference held in Nairobi, and we saw people being paraded, and they're all victims of human rights abuses and torture.
Right.
But in your research, what are the facts that we need to know?
Well, for me, my work largely rotates around marginalization.
Okay.
So I would largely speak about marginalization, and I think so I will speak about the broader issues around what's happening in the country. But for me, I think the situation gets worse for organizing around issues of marginalization. Here I'm talking about issues like sexual minorities, I'm talking about issues like sex work, I'm talking about issues like injecting drug users. These are seen as the worst of the worst in this country. And there's some sort of witch hunt that is going on right now around organizations that are doing work like that, more especially with the closure of sexual minorities in Uganda over non-registration. You see, it has been a battle that has been going on over some time because since 2012, SMAG has been through the government processes. They have been through the Uganda Registration Services Bureau, which denied them registration, claiming that their name was unacceptable. And so in such circumstances, you have no legal option except to continue working that way. And so they continued working that way until the NGO Bureau said, well, you have to stop work because we're not registered. Now, that also means that if they can go against SMAG, which is quite a big organization, then what about the small organizations that are doing similar work? But also if you think about what happened before with Chapter 4 and Nicholas Opio, he's being arrested, he's being arraigned in court, that also makes other people very much worried, especially for small organizations that are not even that much acceptable or loved in this country of Uganda. So for me, the issue of marginalization is becoming a big issue. We have an issue around, we had a recent victory in court around rogue and vagabond, which was great because for the first time the court declared that, you know what, if you charge people with being rogue and vagabond, which is an offense that is not defined, which is an offense that basically goes against the right to liberty and the right to movement of persons, things like wandering on the streets, things like appearing like a reputed thief. I don't know who of us here appears like a reputed thief and what that actually means. So the court said, well, this is unconstitutional. The problem remains that even though the court said that, the police is going to simply change who it charges and who it arrests, and then to charge them with being idle and disorderly, to charge them with being a common nuisance, meaning that the battle is not yet won. We have a small victory over rogue and vagabond, but the police is going to simply change. So people are picked off the streets every evening, hawkers, people who ply their trades on the street are always picked up by the state and then arrested and then charged under these provisions. And that's becoming a bigger and common problem, despite the fact that the president at one point spoke about it and said, you know what, so person proof of being idle and disorderly. But this continues, they simply change the charges. Those are the issues I would really highlight.
All right, fair enough. Doctor, let me just come to you. Adrian seems to focus on the injustices against corporate entities, the organizations, the NGOs. But I think to me the bigger issue could be the human rights question that affect the human being directly. I saw you were in Nairobi. First of all, what were you doing in Nairobi? Yes, prima facie we saw it was around advocacy and issues around human rights. But for the benefit of our viewers, what exactly were the key take-homes from the conference in Nairobi? Because I know it was around human rights.
Okay.
Yeah, but also why Nairobi and not Uganda?
Briefly, I will talk about Nairobi, but let me first give the fundamentals about the status of human rights in Uganda. Center for Constitutional Governance is a cluster head of youth rights in the peer review mechanism that is chaired by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but this is a UN human rights peer review process for assessing the status of human rights in all the UN member states. So we handle the youth cluster. Since the time of lifting of age limits and the time of the fiasco in the by-elections, what's this Abirga place?
Arua?
The youth, the young people, have been at the center of our politics, especially given the people power equation. So you have young people saying, we want change, and people power and now the National Unity Platform, largely with, I think the eldest people there are my age mates in that party. So, and then the human rights violations that are politically led, abductions, kidnaps, you know, the people arrested for wearing the red berets, the people in court martial, all of them are that generation of Bobi Wine supporters. And then away from that, you have the usual political violations of opposition supporters, largely FDC, now comes in, also with the major political casualties. But when it comes to freedom of association, expression, and the freedom of conscience, then you have a clampdown on civil society. You have a clampdown on media. And then the Money Laundering Act, which is used to target people that are speaking up about governance in this country. So that's the sphere, the largest thrust of human rights violations in this country. Politically targeted human rights violations to silence people, silence political dissent, silence citizens' voices, silence citizens' participation in their governance. So having given that broad sphere, in addition to what Adrian has said, then now from there you have the minorities as the target. So that really summarizes the human rights violations in Uganda. It's about political dissent, it's about citizens' participation in their politics, then it's about the minorities. So we have issues in our documentation, issues affecting youth in politics, especially on the opposition side, issues affecting journalists, and issues affecting civil society activists, as well as minorities. The Kenya Convention on Human Rights, where we were invited to as an organization, it's important for the viewers to know that Center for Constitutional Governance is registered in Uganda to work in East and Horn of Africa. We are not a Ugandan NGO. In the same capacity, I chair the East and Horn of Africa Election Observers Network. So we work in East Africa, we work in Horn of Africa, we work in Great Lakes region. We don't just work in Uganda. In that vein, we have partners in all these countries that we work in, because we do not have a physical presence, but we have a networking presence on constitutional matters. So among our partners, we have the Human Rights Commission of Kenya. Kenya has the Kenya Human Rights Commission as an NGO, but there is also the National Human Rights Commission. So the meeting in Kenya was convened by the Kenya Human Rights Commission, an NGO, but also in participation was the National Human Rights Commission of Kenya, represented by its chairman. The chairman of the National Human Rights Commission of Kenya, an equivalent of Uganda Human Rights Commission, stated that this meeting should have been in Uganda, and it's unfortunate that and it should have been convened by the Uganda Human Rights Commission, because that's an entity with a constitutional mandate to mitigate all issues concerning human rights of all Ugandans. So he said that it's unfortunate that his colleagues in Uganda have no stamina to host such meetings and do their constitutional mandate. And he said that it's in that capacity that Kenyans then think they should be concerned in the spirit of East African integration process, in the spirit of Ubuntu, in the spirit of Africanness, but also in spirit of regional and international protocols and conventions that establish the universality of human rights. So human rights have no boundaries. You cannot even bring a question of why Kenya, because they are universal. Violations of human rights in the US concern us. That's why we are part of the Black Lives Matter. So you cannot raise the question of boundaries when it comes to human rights. And that's what we are doing in Kenya.
All right, because the enforcement of these rights are actually domestic in nature. That whereas we have international conventions,
they are not domestic. That's why we have ICC. It's speaking on Bashir. They are not domestic. The universality of human rights removes boundaries and recognizes that all lives matter globally, regardless of where you are. Yeah.
All right, Adrian, let me come to you. Adrian, all men are born equal. Those are the opening statements of the American Declaration of Independence, right?
Yes.
So my concern then is that whereas we attempt to emphasize human rights, these rights have reservations, that you can only exercise your rights.
And maybe one thing I forgot before Adrian comes in. The Kenya Human Rights Commission, the NGO, is established to promote and protect human rights in Africa. So they were within their mandate. Yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah.
Yes, Adrian, I was saying that all men are born equal is the opening statement in the American Declaration of Independence. So it means that these rights must be fairly given to all citizens. So if you attempt to exercise your rights, but then in so doing you infringe on the rights of others, then the state has a responsibility to come in and say, hey, look here, yes, you have rights to demonstrate, but you are going to inconvenience other citizens who are going about with their business. So is it right that the state at times can come in to say that we must crack down on person A, B, C, D because they're infringing on the rights of others? Is the state entirely wrong at times when they come out to protect other citizens?
Well, very interesting question, but I will start by rephrasing the quotation that you took from the American Declaration and go to the one of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the UDHR, that all human beings are born equal in rights and dignity. That's more applicable because it doesn't say all men, and then second, it's not American, it's universal.
UDHR.
But still, your point is still the same, that all people are entitled to the same rights, everywhere, like again, someone has been saying.
He can defend himself that he's talking in the context of the Bible.
As we progress to language changes,
mean both.
No, if man means woman, then I think the better word would be woman to mean man, because woman has more letters than man. So man should be in woman, not woman in man.
Interesting.
But for me, the aspect of the spirit of the UDHR is that from then onwards, 1945 onwards, states agreed, sat down and agreed. Even Uganda, even though they weren't there at the time,
we have signed
but
and
eventually
ratified.
we've agreed that this binds us, that all human beings are equal in dignity and rights. Now, the point we're talking about is the point of a limitation of rights. And I like that, limitation of rights, because if we are all to exercise our rights at once, at the same time, there will be out of anarchy. Like if I want to speak and you want to pray and everyone does it at the same time without limitation, that would be problematic. That's why some rights are limited. There are rights that you don't limit. There are rights that are non-derogable, you don't touch them. But there are some rights, most rights are actually limited. Now, limitation is important, so that but there are grounds that are specific on how you can actually limit rights, and that's important. It's not anything that you want, that goes. Our own constitution restricts human rights to what we call public interest. But then to further restricts public interest to something that is actually acceptable in a free and democratic society.
Free, just, and
So
acceptable.
what's a free and democratic society? What kind of test is that? So you can talk of morals, you can talk of protecting others, you can talk of public health, which is something they have used in COVID-19, they have also used it in Ebola, they have used security. All those may be justifications, but they also have limitations within those justifications, and that's what is important. So if the state says no one can ever demonstrate about anything in Uganda, that's problematic. Because I think what we are seeing, the trend seems to be like the only people who can demonstrate are those who are supporting the government positions. So once in a while, if someone is opposing, if someone is pro whatever term or whatever it is, or someone is celebrating a birthday, some other side is celebrating a birthday, those ones are allowed to move through town. On the other hand, those who are demonstrating violations and violence by the state are not allowed to demonstrate. Then you cannot say we are applying this limitation equally, because then no one is supposed to demonstrate. That can't happen, of course. You have to allow people to demonstrate. But then if you apply it in such a way that certain people can demonstrate, others cannot demonstrate, that's problematic. Number two, if you also limit rights beyond what is acceptable in a fair democratic society, then that's too much. Like you cannot say we have a blanket ban
What's
on
acceptable
demonstrations.
and just.
And just, exactly.
Yes.
We have a blanket ban on demonstrations. We have a blanket ban on assemblies. We have a blanket ban. That cannot happen. So
But
for me,
also there are exceptions, Doctor. Like NRM is free to
exactly.
demonstrate. NRM is free to assemble.
Yes.
So the people who are closed out are in the opposition.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And you cannot, one of the principles of human rights is non-discrimination. If you're going to apply them, you're going to apply them equally to each and every person. So yes, the state has that right to say, well, I'm limiting in regard to public interest, but not to that extent. You cannot limit human rights to the extent that they become illusory, to the extent that they become non-existent. The rights take precedent, not the limitation. Yeah.
All right, fair enough. Doctor, let me just come back to you. Could you help us paint a picture if there's a correlation between democracy and human rights? Because countries like, for example, well, first of all, you might want to define first democracy, because then we can establish whether the UK kind of democracy, where it is quasi monarchy and quasi, I don't know even how to call it. It's a hybrid setting. But is there a close correlation between democracy and human rights? Is it true that countries that have strong democratic principles indeed end up having human rights values being upheld? But also, as you do this, you want to compare with, for example, Saudi Arabia, whereby, Gulf countries rather, in general. Their issues around human rights are not very up to speed, but their democracy, people seem to accept their leaders. So, I don't know, perhaps you want to define first democracy, but also then as you relate democracy and human rights.
You know, the simplest definition of democracy is the government of the people, for the people, and by the people. I think it's the easiest way.
Whether elective or monarchy, doesn't matter.
No, yeah, let's go step by step. Government of the people, for the people, and by the people. What does this mean? And that's the Greek definition. Government of the people. It means that the people, and in this case majority, must sign up for that form of governance. Government of
The people.
the people. They must choose it as their form of governance. They must embrace it as their way of choosing leaders. Government of the people, for the people. Now let's go to the second bit, for the people. For the people, it means that you must serve the wishes, values, and aspirations of the people. And that is our Article 1 of the Constitution. That is our Article 126. Judicial power is derived from the people and must be dispensed in line with the values, wishes, and aspirations of the people. Same applies to executive power. So that's our governance of the people. By the people. It means that the people must at every stage sanction your acts. That is the citizen participation. That is the accountability. That is the transparency. That's the rule of law. Human rights falls in the second cluster. For the people. Wishes, values, aspirations of the people. That's the simple definition. What are the principles of democracy? Rule of law, free media, human rights, transparency, accountability, and citizen participation. They are all covered under the simple definition. And that is democracy in simple terms. You know, people like thinking we have imported democracy. This thing is foreign. Human rights are foreign. You are foreign agents. So why, we can call it Ubuntu. Is that also foreign? What is Ubuntu?
The spirit of I am because you are.
Yes. And that is
in Uganda.
for the people and by the people. Is Ubuntu.
Yeah.
Is that also foreign? People are becoming, I don't know what to call it, apologetic to autocratic leadership, and they feel burdened and want to take responsibility. And they end up blaming concepts.
Yeah.
They end up blaming the language that me and you, Moses, use, because I don't know your local language, your mother language, tongue. You don't know mine. So how would I talk to you? I know that we are communicating in English, and that this is not our fault. But do I know your mother tongue? Which other common language can me and you speak?
It should have been Kiswahili, maybe.
Do you know it? I don't. I'm not fluent.
Which is also quite foreign.
Yes,
But don't worry about
yes,
that.
which is also, by the way, has its origins in the
world, yes.
Arab world and the Arab movement in East Africa.
Yes.
It's not also indigenous to us. So when you look at a standard democratic governance, you know, the benchmarks of democratic governance, respect for rule of law, and that means equality before the law. All men are equal under the law. The principle of clean hands comes in.
Equity.
Yes, the principle of justice administered, you know, delayed justice is denied justice. And these are the challenges we are grappling with.
Yeah.
The World Justice Report for 2022 was released in October. I got to know recently that many of our actors, including Acadia advocates, Kampala Associated Advocates, and others, are local agents of the World Justice Report. Because I was like, how do they get their
How do they
data?
get the information?
Who are they working with? Until then, the people told me, they said, no, but we are the people who do data for Uganda. Uganda ranked 128 out of 140. And the Freedom Report that was released this week by Freedom House, Uganda scored 34% on matters of civil and political rights.
So that's a retake. So you got a retake.
I think that's how badly we are doing. But without going far, we can go to the report of state parties under the UN Human Rights Council. I think that we are in red. We are in red on all the parameters used by the UN Human Rights Council. The report of the state parties, the recommendations in the past, because this was the second time for Uganda to be peer reviewed. So the recommendations of the first peer review were all ignored by our country. And we have more recommendations coming in. And it's no wonder that we have a number of sanctions under the Magnitsky Act, and most of them are in regard to abuse of human rights. So that's how badly we are doing as a country.
All right, Adrian, let me come back to you. Just yesterday, the Constitutional Court has made a landmark decision in the case of Dr. Businja Kavumba versus Attorney General, where court has declared the appointment of 16 judges in acting capacity as unconstitutional. And I think as lovers of rule of law, this is a good decision because it then can help us uphold the independence of the judiciary. Now, because as we discuss human rights, we must be able to examine the independence of the judiciary because it is them who, at the end of the day, are going to either enforce these laws or to render justice. So, the independence of the judiciary, how far have we reached in terms of achieving that?
Before I answer that
Can
about
they
the independence of the
administer
judiciary,
justice without, being partial?
yeah, before I answer that, I would like also to add something to what I was answering about democracy,
Yeah.
the definition. And you asked about Saudi Arabia and all the other countries.
Yes.
I won't really comment about the countries, but the point for me I wanted to make around democracy is also the minority voice within democracy.
Yes.
The democracy is not simply about majority role.
Yeah.
It's also about minority say.
Having their say.
Exactly. The freedom to say something. The right that the majority have their day and then the minority have their say. That's very important.
Yes.
That a democracy must respect
Now, I want to ask
the
you,
weakest people.
in your as you categorize minorities, where do you put the youth?
No, the minority in democracy applies to, like, for example, Museveni has got 68%. The others of the 62 are the minority now in that democratic process.
Oh, okay. So I
Yes.
thought it's in terms of gender and demographics.
Not
Yeah,
exactly.
but how can youth be minority when you have the big
Yeah,
numbers?
exactly.
In
because
some countries,
that's why
they can
I
be
wanted to ask.
minorities.
Yes,
though.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask.
So in countries where they're minorities, then they can have their say. In Uganda, they say the youth are not minorities. But at the same time, if you kind of think about it in terms of power, because minority is not just about numbers,
Numbers,
also
yeah.
power. We know the minority in South Africa, which was the white minority that had lots more power than the majority who were blacks.
Yeah.
And even up now, maybe still some dynamics like that operate. Now, about the connection between that and the independence of the judiciary, between marginalization, between minorities, the independence of the judiciary is that the other two institutions are majoritarian institutions. Parliament is elected by the people.
Okay.
And the majority go to parliament. That's why we have NRM dominating our parliament right now. The president is voted for by the majority. If the election is free and fair, then the president that we have is basically a majoritarian president.
That's true.
That's what makes the executive and the legislature majoritarian.
Oh, okay.
The only institution, the only organ of government that is not majoritarian is the judiciary. And this is important. Because then the judiciary is not elected by the people, it's appointed usually by through certain processes. In Uganda, it's more problematic because then you have the president basically doing the appointment together with the Judicial Service Commission, but at the end of the day, it becomes the president to appoint. Now, what does this mean if the judiciary is not seen as independent? Because for me, being fair also has to be seen, and independent has to be not just to be seen,
Justice
to be done,
must not just be done,
but also to be seen. People must
done.
see that
Yeah.
this is a fair process. Let us look at the example of appointing acting justices. Like, you are acting capacity for a number of years. So you are coming in as a judge, you take the oath as a judicial officer, and then they tell you you are acting. Acting subject to what conditions?
So security of tenure is compromised.
Security of tenure. Like, if you do something wrong, then someone is going to be vetting at the end of your term, and they want to confirm your appointment. So you really cannot appoint judges in acting capacity because of that. A judge is appointed for life. So once you decide that this judge is going to be appointed, then they are there for life because then they won't worry about their tenure, about their emoluments, because that's why you cannot even change their emoluments, how much they are paid, every month, because they must be secure enough to know that I can make this decision and I'm okay, my salary is okay, my children are going to be okay, and then I can make these decisions without fear or favor. That's why for me, that decision that the Constitutional Court has to really be uploaded, that, you know what, you can't appoint judges in acting capacity. Of course, I thought the Constitutional Court had to get a bit further and annul whatever has been done under that kind of appointment. But of course, that has lots of implications. But at least I think the judiciary in Uganda has to go beyond this being so simply making declarations and they start making orders, which is something that I decided at some point, like they make actual orders. Like, you know what? The state must report back, which was done in this case also.
Yes.
The state must report back within this period of time.
Yes.
Government must do this and report back to the court.
Yes.
That is powerful, and that's important. It makes the court have a lot more role to play in the running of affairs of the country. But also, we can rely on the court to know that, you know what, when I go to court, I'll be protected. But for me, the other aspect of independence of the judiciary that I'm worried about is, what do we go to do in court? We go to court to get redress, to get justice in courts of law.
Yes.
We have cases that we've taken for courts of law. Like, we had a case we took during the COVID period for violations that occurred during COVID. And then each of these people won 5 million shillings each. We even took this case actually beyond Uganda to the UN, to the working group on arbitrary detentions at the UN, and we won. And still, that UN ordered that the government pays. Now, in terms of reparations, the other day I saw.
Have they paid?
Who pays? I saw a list of reparations. In Swan Social Come, I saw families, Bianyima, etc., come for your money. What about us? The small man who wins the 5 million for Tokyo. Why are those compensated? And how long do I have to wait if I'm compensated for such a thing? So for me, if the courts keep on making decisions and no one ever compensates you, then it beats the reason as to why we go to courts of law for justice, because there's no justice that comes out of it. So the judiciary must also push for enforcement of their own orders. I know issues
I'm
about
told
separation of
actually
powers,
they're
etc.
there's about 10 billion tied up in court awards.
Exactly. So the government simply says, you know what? Let's ignore those judges. Let them make their decisions. What do we care? And that's
Yeah.
problematic.
After all, we won't pay.
And that's problematic because people are going to see the judiciary as something that cannot act. Something that you go to and you cannot get redress. The same way the Uganda Human Rights Commission. They used to make decisions and no one gives no one issues any awards. What does that mean?
All right, Doctor.
Let me first come in on the issue of the Middle East countries that you are talking about in terms of democracy. And I will just use one example that is common to Ugandans, because I think we have more Ugandans in Dubai
I know.
than any other part of the Middle East. If you go to Dubai, 15% of the population are indigenous. The rest are foreigners, and it's easy to get citizenship in Dubai so long as you qualify to invest. So you have a country that has 75% of the population today. They are non-indigenous. But and Dubai has existed for 50 years, by the way. Uganda is 10 years older than the United Arab Emirates. But they are the fastest growing economy in the world with all of the industries, and everybody has their eyes on the UAE. So when the government made a decision to extract or exploit their oil, they have one resource, oil. UAE was a desert with the 9 small islands, which they call the Emirates. So you have the unit of these 9 islands, and then that's what forms the UAE, United Arab Emirates. So they made a decision to invest money for the 15% indigenous people. They have housing on the richest street of Palm Jumeirah. They have beautiful houses, free, serviced with electricity and water, and they receive allowances from the state. So when we define democracy, I know that they have traditional leadership, like a king and whatever. So when we define democracy as a government of the people, for the people, and by the people, it means that whoever assumes the mantle of leadership must serve the views, values, aspirations, and wishes of the people. Are they doing it? Effectively. People have free access to quality health education. UAE is now a destination for medical tourism.
But you said only the 15%.
No, because the others are me and you who get citizenship by virtue of our investment. So today, if you
But
bought,
you said
I'm
rights
coming.
are universal.
Yes, I'm coming in, Moses. So if today you bought, like I see apartments for buy and mansions in UAE, if you bought that mansion today as your holiday resort, you would qualify for citizenship and you can apply. So many of the other 85% have dual citizenship on the basis of the money they've invested in the country. So they fly in and out. But I'm sure that when they are in, maybe they have access to healthcare, they have access to education, because these services are free for all citizens. But if you have a Bill Gates or a Branson investing in UAE, does he want free healthcare? Because these are the other citizens. Yeah. So is the government serving people? Is it for the people? Is it by the people? Or are the people aggrieved?
I think that question we have to answer it continuously. But, Doctor, civil society has been at the forefront of castigating the judiciary for the lack of independence. Do such decisions partly vindicate the judiciary? Are they trying to portray some level of independence? And therefore, we can rely to them for them to enforce the issue of human rights in this country?
Well, I want to state that the last resort, the means of last resort for everyone seeking redress in the country is the judiciary.
That's right.
So the requirement for the judiciary to be impartial and to dispense justice without fear or favor is to make sure that they protect the rights of everyone and are able to fairly and justly adjudicate matters brought before them. Let me give 2 examples that have brought to question the leadership of our current Chief Justice, His Lordship, Justice Owinidoro. One was the election petition, whose grievances are still handled with the harassment of Justice Sachi.
At the moment, yeah.
So I think that was his first litmus test of baptism of fire as a Chief Justice. Did he pass the test? Did he conduct himself in a manner that nobody could point fingers at him? I do not think so. The way the Robert Kyagulanyi petition was handled, to the extent of withdrawing after losing all the trust, punched holes in the leadership of Justice Owinidoro. Then the last, the last nail of that saga was the denial for Justice Sachi to read her minority report, which legally would not have taken away anything. Because in judicial decisions, like the case we are celebrating of Justice Kabumba and Karamaji Andrew, it was a 4-1. Yeah. So a decision of one judge dissenting would not have taken away anything from Justice Owinidoro, save for political bootlicking. Regarding the majority, carry the day. Even where the famous decision where Justice Kanyihamba and the late Justice, I'm forgetting the name.
Mulenga? Yes,
dissented in the Kizza Besigye case. It was 2 versus 3. Museveni's victory was upheld. The Chief Justice Odochi did not lose anything. So how do you stop? There were 11 judges on the panel. You have 10 versus 1. And you are running around stealing files as a Chief Justice? And you want citizens to clap for you?
Switching of power.
Switching of power? Amidst media coverage? And you want us to sit here and clap that you are a dignified Chief Justice? How?
So are you saying that
I'm saying that is one example as a test. And in my view, they failed it. When you look at the further witch hunt of Justice Sachi, it is a shame. The Permanent Secretary of the Judicial Service Commission, Pius Bigirimana, alleges that Justice Sachi has abandoned duty. But are you aware that Supreme Court has been closed for 8 months? And all judges have been working from their homes? Even up to now, it has not reopened. So how did she abandon duty? In a closed court. First of all, it is a scandal to close a court with more than 700 cases before it. And the court of final appeal, the final appellant court in the country, is closed for 8 months.
But also the PSV doesn't have the powers to actually do what he did.
That's what, to begin with. Justice Owinidoro has closed the Supreme Court of Uganda. And even Parliament has not called him to order. For 8 months. They are only handling interlocutory orders. 8 months.
But you said they're working from home.
Yes, but what can you do from home? Can you sit a panel of 5? A minimum panel of Supreme Court is 5.
No, I mean,
can they sit from their homes?
We have all this technology with us.
Have they done that? Exactly. If they had said they are working digitally, nobody would have said the court is closed, even under COVID.
Yes.
Courts worked digitally. But even that is not there. Were you aware as a law student?
No,
exactly. So that is another failure of the current Chief Justice. The third failure of courts is the mistreatment of the 2 MPs. We are talking about impartiality in the eyes of the citizen. You know, justice must be seen to be done. It's not something you are going to look for in research and studies. Do you think that for the 2 years of incarceration of the 2 opposition MPs, without even a right to bail, with even 15 witnesses saying they were pushed to incriminate them, without the drama that is unfolding, with the denial to hand over exhibits to the defense counsel, do you see justice being done in the eyes of the citizen? And who is presiding over that injustice? I rest my case.
Anyway, I don't want to go into details of that particular case, but at times maybe the judiciary is insufficient, is insufficient rather, or even the DPP itself at times might find challenges with investigation. But anyway, still about the judiciary. Still about the judiciary. Dr. Sarah has no kind words. And my question was that even with the mistakes that were made in the past, have they tried to vindicate
You can
themselves
even add the
along the way?
appointment. You can even add the case. The appointment of acting. You think the Chief Justice didn't know the Constitution? Over the Nabanja saga, he was on media saying, I drafted that Constitution. I know every piece. So he's implementing it.
Good question. But Adrian, my concern is that even with the mistakes that Sarah has cited out in the past, has the judiciary gone ahead to vindicate itself? For example, in the recent decision that they've just taken by the Constitutional Court, where the Chief Justice came out to castigate the Prime Minister for her actions as interfering with the work of the judiciary. Right. So are these some of the things that should be able to vindicate them and not, throw them under the bus just continuously?
Well, there are two things about judicial independence, or legitimacy for that matter. The judicial legitimacy. There is internal legitimacy, then there's external legitimacy. She has been talking about the internal legitimacy. That what does the court portray itself to be? And that's important. Like, who do you portray yourself to be? Of course, it's too early to say that they are vindicating themselves at the moment, in my view. Like, they have made a few decisions of recent that are really interesting. But you find that the judiciary has now become a place where anyone can do whatever they want. Anyone can go and play with the judiciary and they go scot-free, including the Prime Minister issue, the Nabanja issue still. I don't think that it has been resolved. If at all it's resolved, is the way it should have been resolved. I know they're putting out statements. We are still investigating. We've discussed with how we settled it. How do you settle it that way? You are an independent branch, an independent organ of the state, which you are co-equal to the executive. You are co-equal to the legislature. How do you run your entity? How is it perceived by the people? How do you manage your affairs? Who runs? Who says what in the judiciary? And that all that is very important. So for me, I still agree with her that I think it's too early for us to say they are vindicating themselves. I think they still have a lot to do to ensure that we actually restore our belief that the judiciary is the place you can run to. Yes, have confidence in them.
Okay, well, but I think they're trying. Because even
they don't have to try, they have to do.
They don't have to try. There's no space for trying. Justice must be seen to be done.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, Doctor, just the issue of human rights. I want us to examine the rights of women. And to this, I want us to cast a light on, is there a correlation between human rights and poverty or the economic situation as it stands in Uganda? Because I was reading a report and the rate of teenage pregnancies, the rate of early child marriages has gone very high. And if you look at the gender-based violence and all this abuse of human rights that happens at that level, it is largely inspired by the poverty and the economic situation. So as we speak about human rights broadly, and let's just cast some light on the rights of women, all right? I know that Uganda is a signatory to the Maputo Protocol of Mozambique that, encourages us to emancipate and empower women, but also our legal framework.
Right to maternal health.
Exactly. So the rights of women as it stands right now, are we making progress?
Well, the rights of women, let me categorize them in three ways. One is political rights.
Yes.
Politically, if you go by the figures, statistics, Ugandan women are not doing badly. But we are below the 50% threshold. The beginning of emancipation of women through the Beijing Conference in 1955. What the women leaders then aimed to achieve was women in the boardrooms, women on the decision-making tables. And Uganda picked a third, which is enshrined in our constitution, a third representation in all decision-making avenues to have a third of women. But the AU Constitutive Act in Article 16, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and all other regional and international instruments have since adopted gender parity, where you can't talk of a third. We want 50-50 on the table. that 50-50 is not yet realized in Uganda, and I hope I will be able to see it in my lifetime. I hope my children will grow up in that gender parity environment in schools, in leadership, in the business, in all spheres of life. So that's what we aim to achieve. We have the numbers, but how practical or how useful are so the debate, even on a third, is beyond the numbers. Maybe it's important to note that in the current cabinet, we have 44% women, which is a bit of an improvement, because in the previous cabinet, we fell short of 30%, we were 27%. So what we are interrogating as we move towards gender parity is how effective are the numbers in serving the interests of women. We are doing badly in that sphere. And that is my second indicator.
So it is women failing to uplift fellow women.
But a third cannot make a decision. If we go in parliament, we have, for example, the marriage and divorce bill that has been on table in the shelves for 5 decades. If we said today, pull it off the shelves and vote, do we have the vote? That's why gender parity is important. Because even if all the women voted for the marriage and divorce bill today, we cannot get to the majority to pass it. That's why gender parity is important. We saw most men in the previous parliament vulgarizing the marriage and divorce bill on falsehoods. For example, the then MP for Chiga County, Jack Sabit, in his public consultations went to his constituency and told the people that for you, in order to get married, you need the permission of the minister. The people cried and said, but where are we going to get the minister from? Please don't vote for that bill. Was that true? Did he consult on the basis of the bill? So it is on such falsehoods that the marriage and divorce bill was rejected. And it's so unfair because it seeks to promote, like Professor Mamdan said when we were at the consultations in Makerere in 2013, he said the marriage and divorce bill would be the greatest social revolution in this country because it protects the right of everybody, children, men and women. But people denied that bill on falsehoods, and we don't have the numbers because we are still limited under a third. So it's not that women are against themselves. Of course, some women could vote otherwise. But if you have the parity, we have a lot of men that are pro-women and are it's not just being pro-women, they are for progress. Because I think any person who is against women and the women emancipation agenda, they are against progress of society. The third aspect is the young child. We saw a wave, embarrassing wave of teenage pregnancies in this country. A study showed that most of the young children are abused by people who are meant to protect them. Their uncles, people in their homes, people in the schools. It's a shame. Some girls are defiled by their own fathers. These are beasts that are not fit to be in society. How would you develop sexual feelings for a toddler and above all your own child? How? These are beasts that shouldn't be in our society. So those are the 3 layers of women emancipation that we need to achieve in this country.
All right. Adrian, I want to invite you to also make a comment regarding women emancipation, because Doctors has focused on the political, and she has, painted a good light, because the Speaker of Parliament is a woman, the Vice President. I mean, they're holding so many powerful political offices, but the issues around
beyond the rights, numbers.
Yes, the issues around the rights of women still lingers in a balance, all right? Access to maternal health, and because these are rights. So just I have to invite you to make your comments. Do you think as a country we are progressing in terms of political but also economic right? Well, knowing that the women have an affirmative action economic fund, the UEP, that is there to emancipate and empower women economically. So how are we progressing as a country?
Well, I'm going to take that question from the point of view of minorities again. I'm a minorities person, normally. Like how people, so even among women, there are still women that are not women.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we look at sex workers, for example, many women regard them as not that kind of woman. Those are not the kind of women you're talking about when you're talking about women. If you look at lesbian women, for example, they're seen as completely less of women, and yet they're women. If you look at transgender women, people don't even want to go there. You see, to look at these women also as as women who deserve the same kind of protections, whose maternal rights, you have talked about maternal health, rights have to be taken into consideration, who also have to be decriminalized in terms of the conduct that's criminalized. In our laws, sex work is criminalized, same-sex intimacy is criminalized. And we don't look at this when we are looking at aspects of women's emancipation. So these are things we should look at. Every woman is a woman, and every woman should be treated basically the same as much as possible. So I think that's the dimension from which I would take it. So when you look at it from that perspective, we are still a long way. We still have a very much long way to go. But also in terms of maternal health alone, issues of abortion, issues of comprehensive sexual education have become problematic in this country. Like there's an increasing wave of, how can I say, there's a group of people that want to create some sort of moral panic in this country around things around comprehensive sexuality education. That if we teach children about sex, then children will become sex beasts, I guess. But that's not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to make people, children, including girl children, to understand what sexuality is all about, how they can protect themselves, and how they can make good choices as regards sexuality. That's not happening because they're now backtracking on the basis of morals and all these other aspects. If we talk about it in terms of abortion rights, the rights to terminate a pregnancy as a woman, that's something that's not even being discussed at the moment. So that's something that we don't even have to go there. But how many women are dying every single day out of illegal abortions or not unsafe abortions? Because if you cannot allow me to have an abortion safely in a hospital, then I'm certainly going to have the abortion because you cannot stop that from happening. But then how am I going to have it? You see? So using all sorts of code means. Someone gave statistics that about 14 women die every single day out of abortion-related causes. And this would be the equivalent of losing a matatu full of people, a taxi full of people every single day. But no one cares because these are immoral women and things like that. So for me, if I take it from that perspective, we still have a very long way to go before we emancipate women fully, before you let women have control over their own bodies and their own reproductive choices, as we ought to do.
All right, Doctor, as we wrap up this, before we move to the governance questions around Kenya and South Africa, is that let's just examine the aspect of provocation. I know that there are certain state operatives who have exhibited being overzealous or being high-handed. But do you think that at times citizens provoke state operatives? Because, and this I ask without prejudice, right, is that the state operatives are human beings. That if you provoke them, if you insult them, it is only human that their adrenaline is going to, their emotions. So do you think that perhaps the citizens themselves at times have played a role in terms of getting the state to be high-handed and ending up violating their rights? Because someone goes on Twitter and insults
Moses,
another
the
person,
kind of
insults their mother. So I don't know.
Moses, the kind of security personnel you're defining is basically an incompetent person unfit to put on a citizen's uniform. To the police and army and other security personnel out there, I want to remind you that the jobs you hold are given to you by citizens. The uniform you put on is a citizen's uniform. The guns you hold are owned by citizens. And your duty is simple. The Constitution requires you to be non-partisan. The Constitution requires you to protect Ugandans with their property, as well as the territorial integrity of this country. The kind of security personnel you're defining has unfortunately been vested on Ugandans by virtue of President Museveni's unfortunate longevity in power. We have a few leaders that have, very few, I know 2 examples of leaders that have ruled beyond 30 years and stayed normal. What do I mean by staying normal? Stayed true to the values, wishes, and aspirations of the people. 2, I know Fidel Castro stayed true to the values of the revolution that he led and peacefully handed over power without becoming a nuisance, without blatant abuse of citizens' rights and freedoms, like kidnaps, torture, detention in illegal places, detention without trial, denial, deliberate denial. How can, as a country, I will go back to the issue of the incarcerated MPs. During the 7th Parliament, 2 MPs from Gulu, Honorable Regan Okumu and Ochula, faced murder charges. But they were immediately released on bail after the mandatory 6 months by virtue of being leaders in society. What are the grounds for bail? Do you have a fixed place of abode? Do you have people to grant you security? Do you have a standing in society? So the citizen out there listening, if your MP is regarded as an delinquent,
Arrogant vagabond.
yes, a vagabond that does not qualify for court bond, even beyond the mandatory 6
60
months
days, I know.
by the Constitution, we are all not safe.
Why not?
Beyond that, if you look at the other example of a leader who stayed in power long, the former president of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, I mean, he stayed normal. In his last address to the convention of his party, he said that if you want to kill your country, elevate cheap people to positions of leadership. And this is what Museveni has done. Even to rub it in our faces, he launched his current cabinet and called them fishermen. To tell you that he has gotten a collection of cheap people into positions of power. They cannot call him to account, and he can do as he wishes. Who is carrying out kidnaps in this country? It's unfortunate that Afande Deo has not yet joined us. These are people in citizens' uniform. These are people using citizens' guns to kill them. And who is the leader of security agencies in this country? President Museveni. We must call him to account.
We must call him to account. That is Dr. Sarah. Adrian, as we just wrap this up, the role of international agencies, and to this I want to speak about the United Nations.
Right.
As they advocate and push for enforcement of human rights, in your own words, do you think they do this selectively? Because we have seen the Russia-Ukraine crisis, where human rights have been violated, people have been killed, but the position of the United Nations is lukewarm. All right, but when issues happen here in Africa, they are so quick to pursue and to even indict. All right, so the role of international institutions, are they exactly up to the task, or they have their internal challenges like partisanship and the fear of the 7 Gs?
So for me, I think if we take the UN as them, and not us,
Or
then
even
that's when we see.
or even African Union, if you may like.
Okay, even the African Union. Yeah, but if we take the African Union, the UN, and all these other institutions as them rather than us, that becomes problematic in a way. Of course, you can say that EU is them, because the EU is basically European countries coming up together, forming their own union. But the UN is us. Basically, the UN General Assembly, our president sits in the UN General Assembly. The things they have adopted, the things that we've also adopted. The decisions they make are basically decisions that are supposed to be made by all of us, meaning the UN is part of us. We are part of the UN. So for me, they are apparent, what people look at as being partisan and all that. I think that's not something we should be looking at the moment. So most especially as a response to questions about legitimacy, about violence, about kidnaps. If they talk about kidnaps, if they find that Uganda has committed certain violations, we cannot respond by saying, you know what, you guys are partisan. Is it the truth? Is it what it is? In the country, we all see. So has been giving examples of violations that have been happening in Uganda and those things happening. Is it the UN that is actually creating its own stories about what's happening in Uganda, or is for real? So before we look at whether they are criticizing Russia or not, are we doing the things that we are doing? If we stop doing the things we are doing, then maybe the UN wouldn't have anything to say about us. So for me, their role still remains critical. We are part of the UN institutions. We are part of the decision makers there, and we have to give them all the support and the credits that they need to be able to do what they have to do.
All right, we continue to watch them very keenly. But for now, the viewers are watching us. We're taking a short commercial break, and see you shortly after this, because we shall be diving straight into the issues of governance around Kenya, South Africa, but also broad-based really Africa as a continent. See you shortly.
The Citizens Chatroom happens every Friday at 2 p.m. on Civic Space TV Online on Facebook and YouTube. We invite you to be part of this conversation. Civic Space TV, freedom always.
Yes, viewers, we'll be back from that short commercial break. In the next 1 hour, shall examine 2 incidents, but to start with what is happening in the Republic of Kenya. President William Ruto has gone ahead to suspend the 4 commissioners that contested the August polls, but also he has instituted a commission of inquiry that shall investigate the actions of these 4 commissioners. And of course, we wait for the outcome of that process. But for us, our interest is what does this mean for their governance as a country, knowing that they've just concluded their highly contested election. Shouldn't they be focusing more on reconciliation and peace building and trying to get the country back to its feet? Sarah, let me just begin with you. What do you make of this particular decision by the president?
You know, the standard of governance, as what Dr. Adrian shared in the rejoinder, is the majority having their way and the minority having their say. This cuts across government institutions, our small spaces like civil society, even the smallest unit of society, which is a home. There will always be a dissenting voice, unless you are a total brutal dictator that when you speak, nobody responds. In our small staff meetings, we spend hours arguing with our juniors and listening to their points of views and trying to make sense of it. So what happened at Bomas, which the whole world witnessed, the 4 commissioners alleged, now the word that went viral, opaqueness, that there was opaqueness in the tabulation of results. The grievances went to court, which I think was the most proper forum. When the Azimio team sued Electoral Commission, the 4 commissioners chose to get their own representation and present their views. At first, there was a protest that they cannot get their views, but court said, no, we need to hear them out. They made their case. I think they won one ground. The only ground that the petition won was from the 4. The court said they should have been harmony at that level. But the court was unable to establish the detail of the boardroom disagreements. And they did recommend that in future, there should be a forum for addressing boardroom disagreements, not to spill out into a national crisis. So I thought that issue should have led to rest at that matter. The 3 commissioners that agreed and upheld Ruto's victory, who later won in court, I think most of them are retiring in January, led by Chebukati, the chair of the commission. So given the circumstances, the facts, and when you see now President Ruto on an ad hoc recommendation of Parliament suspending the 4 commissioners, one cannot help but feel that this is witch hunt. A matter went to court. By the way, a matter in our constitution, and I need to check the Kenya's constitution, but the standard practice in common law countries, a matter resolved by courts cannot be revisited by any other forum except by way of appeal. In this case, you had the Supreme Court of Kenya. So there is no way of appeal. It's double jeopardy. That is the standard common law practice. So you have, I don't know who the complainant was, but the allegation is that there were petitions about the 4 commissioners. We all know governance, especially as Ugandans who are used to this kind of drama. It is easy to stage manage up to 1,000 petitions on a matter or more. So I don't know. So petitions came, then a parliamentary committee sat and recommended a tribunal to investigate the conduct of the 4. After the work done by Supreme Court. Supreme Court hearing was broadcast live, and us as neighbors had a chance of seeing what was happening. The matter was interrogated fully.
Doctor, just to remind us, among the issues raised, I think there were 9 issues. Was there a question around the gross misconduct of the commissioners?
No.
I think it did not come up.
No,
So
but
meaning
the court said
did not address the
court
issue
said
of
that
the
in
misconduct.
future, in terms of corporate governance, there should be mechanisms to handle these matters at organization level so that they don't spill over into a national crisis.
So you can say that court did not address
whatever
the
it
issue
is.
of the misconduct of these commissioners.
Okay, whatever it is, let's say. So the Constitution of Kenya provides that where misconduct of such a high-profile public servant arises, there should be a commission of inquiry.
It has been instituted.
A commission of inquiry. I think what is instituted is a tribunal.
Okay.
Okay, but I don't know the mandate. So the parliament has recommended a tribunal. After that, the president ordered for suspension pending investigation of the 4 commissioners, and I think 2 of them have since resigned.
Yes.
But away from the details of what's happening, to me, the crisis in Africa broadly is absence of leaders with magnanimity. A leader that rises beyond pettiness. A leader that reaches out to even people opposed to them and are able to reason objectively. I hope that President Ruto, it is too early to judge, but I hope that President Ruto will rise to be such a magnanimous leader and not a leader shrouded in pettiness.
Okay. Dr. Agril, let me come to you. Still, the question of independence, to me, comes up once again, because the person who has been appointed to chair this tribunal is actually a High Court judge. I think Justice Agre Mwelemule, something like that. He has been appointed to chair that commission. So the nature of judges is one that is supposed to be impartial, just, fair, So do we anticipate that justice shall prevail, that this tribunal shall investigate and come up with a fair decision?
Well,
by virtue of the fact that it's being chaired by
a judge.
A judge, yeah.
That's not enough. I know when the judges are acting as chair of that tribunal, they're supposed to be acting impartially and as judges, but also we know when the judges are also seated in their own places, in their own courtrooms, they're not always entirely impartial. We've seen some decisions coming out that are usually problematic in that respect. But that's within the judicial structures. So for me, judges are humans.
Okay.
And then the message that you send out as the president of the country, when you constitute such a tribunal, what does it mean? When you kind of go that low, to kind of do what may be seen as persecution of a group of people, what does that mean? By the way, if it was about misconduct of the whole commission, that would make more sense, like the whole commission, because I think there are all sorts of different sides pulling different ways. That would have made sense. But only against this 4, that sounds like witch hunt. Also because the direction they were taking and they are choosing to have their own representation was something that kind of showed that they were not necessarily on the side of the winning candidate. For me, that's where the problem is, that how are you being perceived? Again, the issue that we've been repeating all the time, that justice must not only be done, but also be seen to be done. Yeah. It's justice being done, or there's a witch hunt that is going on. So for me, that sort of governance question tags in with even what has been going on, the proposals to have term limits removed from the Kenyan constitution, for example. Like, all right, okay, we're going back to Uganda. The way things have been done in Uganda is the way things are now getting done in Kenya. Because for me, Kenya was a shining beacon. For all of us, we would be like, Kenya, we are going up, we are transcending what happened in 2010. We are transcending all this sort of violence, political violence that happened before, and we're going somewhere. And it's a beacon for all East Africa to kind of follow and see that, you know what, Kenya is doing it the right way, we can also do it the right way. Right now, it seems like lots of pettiness is happening. Looks like lots of victimization is happening. Looks like the new president is going to fight old wars to kind of defeat all enemies, like it has been in Uganda. Our leader here is Sabalwan. He's a chief fighter. You must fight and beat up every single person. No one stands in your way. That's what it seems to be like in Kenya. So for me, I think it should be more of compromise. And the president saw this when he was at his swearing-in speech. He basically said something about reconciliation. Let it bygones be bygones. Let's move on. But that's not happening. So for me, High Court judge or no High Court judge, whoever the head of the tribunal is, that's not exactly what it's about. It's about what impression this sends down, and also what it means to the upcoming IEBC, the new one that is coming up. The new commissioners are coming in. They are being told how to fall in line. This is what you must do. That's the message that's coming across, that you know what, you're not independent enough.
Each regime will end up appointing their own IBC commissioners.
Exactly.
So they will just become regime tools.
Yes.
Okay. Doctor, the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, the leader of the Azimio la Umoja coalition, came out quickly to say that William Ruto is planning to rig the 2027 general election. And this is just part of the whole grand plan. Of course, these are accusations. They are mere allegations. But do they ring a bell to your ears? Is there some
the
reason?
three commissioners who upheld his victory are up for retirement. I'm sure of two, Chebukati and another. I'm not sure about the third. So when you get rid of the four, you are overhauling the whole commission, and you are going to establish your own regime commission. So what is likely to happen is that each regime will have a commission. You come, you are happy to be announced the president, you overhaul the commission, you put in your puppets that are not independent from you. You know, when Kenya Kwanza was campaigning, the biggest issue, they had two bigger issues. The flagships of their campaign was Deep State and Hustler. I know that the Hustler Fund has been set up, and so far about 4 million Kenyans have accessed Hustler Fund money. And part of that also creates automatic savings for the citizens. So we have seen the Hustler Fund. Where is the Deep State? They said they would deal with the Deep State. How are they dealing with it? Is this how they are dealing with the Deep State? Then can it be clear that this is the Deep State? And to our Kenyan viewers, I know we normally have a lot of Kenyan following. Half of the channel following on this is Kenyan, because we discuss topical issues. Kenya is a shining star for us. It's a beacon of hope. It will be very, very depressing if Kenya resorts back to the Moi era or follows the Ugandan regime, deteriorating regime. And we get more worried because of the closeness with the Ugandan regime that we are really struggling to change, which is close, because where Uganda is like the worst days of Moi in Kenya. So that's why we are more interested. But most importantly, we are going into East African Federation. Who will be the leader of the East African Federation? We thought Kenya was that leader. You have the economic muscle, you have the political stability, with a constitution that entrenches independence of institutions. Who will be the East African leader if Kenya destroys these characteristics that today make them stand out? To me, that's my major concern as an East African.
So, do you have any concerns about the comments by Raila Odinga? That this is a plan to rig further elections?
Raila Odinga, I haven't followed whether his rallies have taken place or not. Because as a leader of opposition, yes, he has a role to play. I know that what I read in the media was that they were going to unleash all the information of the election rigging. I might not specifically be interested in the post-mortem things. My major interest as a constitutional watchdog in East Africa is the conduct of President Ruto in as far as promoting and entrenching constitutionalism in Kenya is concerned. Yeah.
Agree. Let me come back to you. Sorry, Adrian, rather. Where does this leave the IEBC on questions of its integrity, but also questions of its impartiality, if I'm to ask? Because it appears like now there is direct executive interference with the actions of and would-be independent institution. So where does this leave the IEBC moving forward? Well, knowing that in the most recent election, the questions around the independence was actually put out there. So does this harm the integrity further, or it's an attempt to rejuvenate, clean up, and put it on a path of trajectory?
again, perceptions, what people perceive the institution to be like. I think where the IEBC is going to be like is our own commission here in Uganda, which everyone looks at and they're like,
It's a, it's a regime too.
Really?
Yeah.
The commission, there's nothing about the electoral commission except bigger regime.
I thought it's about cleaning up, then creating
I
a new.
don't think so. We cleaned up here by appointing a judge,
regime
impartial
entrenching
judge.
themselves.
Impartial judge to be head of the commission. Did anything change really? Do you think there was a drastic change from the old regime of Chigundu to the regime of the judge? So regardless of who you put as the head, the institution is already rotten in that way. So for me, the ABC would have been, again, it was a shining light that we used to see it and be like, oh, the ABC is really
This is what we need.
This is what we need.
Yes.
But now that they're attacking it from all angles, and by the even the dissent within the IEBC at that time was really great. Like, people disagree. If we have disagreed on what this is, some people are saying let's be more transparent, others are saying there is opaqueness. That's something that's actually good. The fact that they are seeing it as something terrible, the president is seeing it as something bad, parliament is seeing it as something bad, is something to worry very much about. Why can't they let dissenting voices be dissenting voices? What's wrong with dissent? What's wrong with bringing out actions and speaking out them out in public? Regardless of whatever the rules may say, whatever the rules that set up the IEBC may say, people have the right to dissent and to air out their views publicly about why they're dissenting. So you cannot always force a uniformity and acceptance by everyone of whatever comes out. So for me, moving forward, and like the comments you have to be to Raila Odinga, that it's already a plan they have started. If you look at it that way,
Can't rule it out.
in terms of have your own regime commission to determine for you, then that's where we are headed. That's what it means. That everybody will be like, oh, that's that new IEBC that has been put in place. There's elections are going to be rigged. There's going to be opaqueness that's going to continue even in the new. So even if someone wins genuinely, people will be like, they didn't win. The same way here in Uganda, even if Museveni won genuinely, no one will really accept that he won genuinely.
Because of opaqueness.
Because of opaqueness.
Doctor, let's just discuss about the question of appointment. And for these institutions like the judiciary, like the commissions, we all aspire to have them very independent. But independence comes from how they get to these offices. Are they elected? Are they appointed? So I know that the question of appointment has been lingering within these conversations for a long time. But we have never come up to recommend how best we think that commissioners or judges should be gotten. So, Doctor, I have to ask you, if it were in your own words to decide, what would you recommend as the most viable means of attaining, for example, commissioners or even judges? Because as it stands, the executive seems to play a much more greater role. So what other alternative is there?
You see, the Kenyan 2010 constitution is a great improvement from the Ugandan constitution. The Ugandan constitution provides for independence of institutions, including the electoral commission. But that independence is not entrenched, especially in the process of recruitment and conduct. The Ugandan constitution has that lacuna. The Kenyan constitution improved and closed those gaps. That's why you see public to ascend to the public office. You go through that public scrutiny. People send petitions about your conduct, known conduct with evidence. And that, applies as to whether you can be shortlisted or not. The recruitment of a chief justice is a public process. I remember sitting through the interview that Dr. William Mutunga did, and his comments on the wigs, and even his own style that includes an earpin. It can't get out of my mind. Have we ever had such in Uganda? In Uganda, there is opaqueness around the appointment of judges. No wonder the judiciary had degenerated to the extent of appointing judges in appointing capacity, which is unconstitutional, under the watch of the current Chief Justice. Unconstitutional. The Constitution is very clear. And that's why I was saying that he says he knows the Constitution word by word. So how come he's not implementing it in his own docket? So, but we want an improvement of that. I know that the Judicial Service Commission sends out adverts, which are numbered on their own notebook. People they are not publicized. So people apply, the shortlisted people are even on the Judicial Service Notes Board, and that's where it stops. Then whoever after interviews, they send a list to the president We never even get to know the people who have reached that stage. So there is opaqueness on that process, and we want it opened up the Kenyan way. That's why Kenya is an inspiration to us, because they improved. Their constitution is a great improvement to the aspirations of Ugandans. And in the East African Federation arena, I know that we are going now for the confederation. So who will be the leader of East Africa? I'm one person who thinks.
I thought that leader was proclaimed.
As who?
Because I mean,
As who and by who?
the
You
Kenyan
can
president,
update me.
The Kenyan president did proclaim that.
And who gives him mandate to decide for East Africans?
Well, all I'm saying is there are already voices emerging that perhaps President Museveni is the father of the region. So I don't know.
The father of the region in terms of what? Chaos and kidnaps that we are discussing here? Is the father of in terms of what?
Political leadership.
In
I don't know. Insightful leadership. I don't know in what context that William Ruto meant it, but he has been
seen on record. You should explain to the East Africans. He's an inspiration in terms of what? Kidnaps, torture, detentions, corruption, abuse of rule, and constitutional appointment of judges. Is an inspiration in terms of what? Longevity in power.
I think well, that is all for our
anyway,
imagination.
Yes, he should explain himself, the person who made that proclamation. But what I was coming to is that in the confederation debate, I wouldn't want to see an East African political integration, which is an integration of chaos, which is an integration of failed states, which is an integration of authoritarianship. It should be an improvement in the wellness of an ordinary East African citizen. And if it cannot meet that test, we shall fight it.
Okay. We shall talk about the federation towards the end. But for now, Dr. Adrian, I want to bring you in. If you look at the election results of the August polls, it was, I think, Ruto got 51% or thereabout, and Raila Odinga got around 49%.
It's a difference of about 200,000 votes.
So that means that the country is almost divided into two.
Yes.
Shouldn't this have been a point for them to say, how can we reconcile the country? How can we come together? How can we extend an olive branch? The deep pocket theory that because I'm in power, I should extend the olive branch to those with lesser leverage. Shouldn't this have been the point for them to bring the country together? But such things, I think it's just opening floodgates for another point of contention, for another, I don't know, will they ever have national consensus?
You mean in the way that Uhuru extended the hand to Odinga again?
Something like that.
Yes, and for me, also that's where I have a problem with majority rule, majority votes in democracy. Like now 51% is majority. Like
50 plus
50
1.
plus 1 is majority.
Actually, for Kenya, it's 50 plus 1.
Yes. So we would have looked at a system where there's some sort of proportions. Like, because really, where do the interests of these 14, is it 49 plus 49.99, where do these interests lie? Where do these people go? Do they, just because we've chosen a leader, doesn't mean that the views of these 49% do not matter. They should also matter for some reason. They should be included somewhere within the process. That's what I personally think about processes, that majority takes it all is not really a very good system. Have a system that reconciles, a system where everyone also has some, but they may not be all may not be presidents, but then how do we have a government that's more of national unity than simply a government that just won in power? So for me, it would have been an opportunity. I like the speech of Ruto when he said, you know what, bygones are bygones. Let us start on. We are going to bring everyone on board. That's what I expected to see happening in Kenya. So it would have been a good moment for them to reconcile and move forward as a united Kenya. Now that visions to continue, we know there are traditional divisions that have been based on tribe and others, and they are continuing to deepen and to get much more entrenched. So I think the Uhuru Kenyatta approach, let us work together, even to the point of actually supporting Raila Odinga, was something that was really good for the future, for the reconciliation of Kenya, because it has really been toned down over the years by tribal differences. So it's a missed opportunity, but let us see. He still has a lot of time. He's just a new leader. He's just got into power. I think he has lots of opportunities to make changes that make things happen for his country.
All right, fair enough. Doctor, the issue of multi-party dispensation. Dambisa Moyo, who is a Zambian economist, writes a very interesting article and says that African states are not ready for multi-party dispensation, but rather what they need is a benevolent leader. And of course, we argued here that no, Kenya has proven us otherwise, that multi-party dispensation actually works, and it is working here in Africa. So, but now with such degeneration, with such incidents, does it put a question on multi-party dispensation in Africa? Are we ready? I don't know. Because we commit so much resources into electioneering, but only to come back and get back to our differences. I don't know, multi-party.
You see, democracy can only be protected by two things, not three things. Laws, watertight laws that everybody must abide to. But that calls for a culture of constitutionalism, respect for laws without bending them. The second issue is strong institutions versus the strongman syndrome, which Africa is largely suffering from. And the third issue is an active citizenry, political aware, knowledgeable, with ability to check the excesses of the leaders. So there are no shortcuts about good governance. We must have the three in place. The laws with a culture for respect for laws. The institutions and the citizen. It's unfortunate that most citizens in Africa conduct themselves as subjects. We saw recently a terrible incident of the leader of the medical profession. They say the next noble profession to ours.
That is true.
To ours, the lawyers.
Yes.
Kneeling, putting the medical attire in a dust. He dusted the profession, figuratively and otherwise. Putting a white coat in a dust. Kneeling for a leader to run, a 40-year-old leader to run again. And
It is right.
I know. You see, even stupidity is a right. So it is so you imagine, the way people respect white. Then the dignity of a medical court. Because to us, non-doctors, this is a race to life. And he's saying, please run again. It is like people celebrating the victory of Ngwema, 43 years, and then I got 95%. I mean, really. So we have vulgarized democracy in Africa to imaginable levels. But when we were in school, we used to say below sea level. At times you don't even know what to say. We need the three things in every country: rule of law and constitutionalism, independent institutions, civic competence of citizens. We are not subjects.
So is multi-party dispensation anywhere
It
around
thrives on the three. It thrives on the three. And you can score the countries that are doing very well. You can score Botswana. You can score Ghana. South Africa with its challenges. You can score, I think when you go to the democracy index in Africa, you can score. They have the three.
Mauritians.
There is no shortcut about it. No.
Okay. Adrian, still on the issue of politics, and how do we distinguish? Because your argument was that the winner-take-all system is one that we must really revisit.
Right.
But you see, the winner-takes-all system is a premise of multi-party dispensation. That our party ran the campaign, and therefore we shall form government, shall do all these things.
Right.
So in your own words, do you think we are better off as a multi-party or as a movement system? Because in the movement, it was merit-based. All right?
It
So-
wasn't, but yeah.
Yeah, if it were upon you to choose multi-party or movement, and to this we can think of even importing it in Kenya.
I think we should let the movement system rest.
Okay.
Like it came, it came, we saw it, let it rest. Because I don't think that was the best system, more especially in
But
terms of its
multi-party is
applicability.
failing. That is my point.
Multi-party is not failing. It's our democracy that is failing. We are really not practicing democracy. We are simply doing elections once every 5 years. But the result is already known. Whoever is going to be the president is known. The president is going to be rigged. People are not going to participate. Like she's been talking about those principles. That's what has failed, not multi-party democracy. But see, it's how we apply it. It's like our application of our changeover from colonialism to independence, which was basically, I think Museveni discovered it's better a mere change of guards. It's when you use such terms, a mere change of guards. The Ugandan, the black man replaces the white man, but that's exactly the same things that the white man was doing before. That is basically a continuation of colonialism, and that's what we are fighting when we talk of decolonization. At this stage, that's not just about the political change of guards, but also a real fundamental change in terms of how things operate. So for me, multipartyism as we apply it in Uganda today is simply a matter of application. There's nothing wrong with the theory of how it works, but the practice of it. The practice of it works in other countries. Why can't it work in Africa? Not in Africa. Why can't it work in Uganda or Kenya? It works in Kenya. It was starting to work, but somehow it's kind of
There's a
backtracking.
little turbulence.
And the truth of that matter is, every leader would want to take as much as possible. Donald Trump tried it in America, to take as much as possible from the Americans. Every leader everywhere wants to take as much as possible to be unaccountable. But the point is, if you have an empowered citizenry which is going to ask and demand for results, that's when they won't allow you to get away with it. And that actually is why the South African example also comes in. And I was a bit disappointed by the failure of Ramaphosa to resign. You see, the resignation of a president in Africa.
But why?
I
Why
don't.
resign?
The point of me, regardless of the reasons of why he's resigning or why he's not resigning, the resignation of a president on the basis of whether it's graft or based on some accusation, and you start up and say, you know what, from what I've seen, I've abused the constitution, I'm resigning. For me, that would be a very serious point. Like, when do we ever resign in Africa?
Have we reached there?
Why not? Why must we first wait for stages to get the back? South Africans have been able to get rid of presidents, to get rid of...
Two of them resigned, Mbeki
exactly.
and Zuma. So that's
Exactly. So it's something that has been done before. It's something that we can also do here, where presidents, where people are put. It's about accountability. You account to the people who put you in power. You account to your own institution. Museveni does not account to the NRM. NRM accounts to Museveni. If there's even anything like NRM in reality, NRM accounts to Museveni, not Museveni accounting to NRM.
Yeah, but is NRM the party in power? I think maybe UPDF.
Exactly. So,
Well, Doctor, you attempted to force my hand to look at the South African question, but that is reserved for a much more later time. For now, let's just wrap the whole Kenyan question. Just your last words to the Kenyans. They are faced with a situation before them.
yes.
And you know that the citizens can actually, rise up and say, no, this was, I mean, every stakeholder has a role to play. So just speak to the stakeholders in Kenya.
The citizens of Kenya have shown before that they can actually challenge the institutions. And that's something that we've been able to learn. From their change in 2010, their new constitution in 2010, which they call new up to now, it's now 12 years old. But their 2010 constitution was amazing. The process that led to it was amazing. The kind of process, the kind of changes we saw happening were amazing. And that was because the Kenyan citizen took it in their hands to say that these changes are going to happen. To say that leaders who are leading in this particular way have to go. Okay, this message would have come to Ugandans more than even the Kenyans. But democracy is easy to make changes, but maintaining them is the problem. 2010 came, they had a new constitution. It's now 12 years, and the constitution is being tested left, right, and center. We've learned it in Uganda. We had a good constitution in 1995, which constitution I think now wouldn't recognize itself so many years down the road because it has been amended so many times. All the provisions that matter have been removed from the constitution, and now it's just a shell of itself. So let the Kenyans guard their constitution ruthlessly. Let them guard their democracy ruthlessly. That's important. That the president should know that you can't do anything that you want just because you are the president in power. That's something that citizens should learn and should be able to uphold all through. That's my advice to Kenyans. That you know what? They know what to do. We don't have to tell them what to do. They have done it before, so they can do it again. Citizens must guard against the backsliding of democracy. And that has to happen everywhere in the world. The same way I think the Americans showed us an example by also fighting against their backsliding of their democracy by removing Trump this time around. Maybe they're bringing him back, So it's like a pendulum. It always goes and swings back. But eventually, it becomes better with time. And that's what the Kenyans should aim at.
Doctor, your last words to the stakeholders in Kenya.
3 things for me: objectivity, neutrality, and the citizen being considered central in all the actions. The people for and against the tribunal must make sure that nobody hijacks their democracy. Failure of which they know where they can return. They've been there before, the Moi era. They've also seen the bloodbath. We had thought that the 2007 post-election violence had happened as a baptism of fire into better democracy. They should guard against backsliding.
All right, since you already have the microphone, I'll just keep it with you as we shift gears to South Africa. We have seen a unique events emerging in South Africa. Cyril Ramaphosa is facing impeachment, process, if I'm to say, of allegedly the farmland, I don't know, is it the Farmgate incident? I don't know, something like that, but around corruption. Sarah, what do you know about this scandal?
You know, the scandal was started by a whistleblower, who is a former chief spy, Fraser, who alleged that President Ramaphosa had swindled he gave 3 figures in his whistleblowing: 5 million, 80 million, or 20 million from the state, and hidden it at his farm. And the red flag was the theft of this money from the farm. When the message came out, Ramaphosa stated that the money stolen at his farm, allegedly in 2019, was from the sale of his buffaloes. Ramaphosa is a known proud owner of buffaloes and Ankole cattle, which he sells very expensively. And then he's one of the billionaire businessmen in South Africa, long before becoming a president. And I'm sure that given the transparency of the South African Constitution, that he has been declaring his net worth as well as sources of income for his family. I think he's the wealthiest president that South Africa has ever got. I might not know about the previous white rulers. I don't know the net worth of apartheid rulers. For me, South Africa starts with Mandela. I have no business with the people who came to abuse Africans on their own land. So that's the extent of my bias, and I've declared my conflict. So given Mandela, President Mbeki, Zuma, I think Ramaphosa comes in as the wealthiest, 4th black leader or 4th post-apartheid leader of South Africa. So when the news broke out, then Parliament constituted a commission of inquiry. The commission of inquiry discovered 3 things in summary. One was that the alleged whistleblower did not table any tangible evidence to the committee. But also, according to the committee, then there were gaps in the defense of Ramaphosa. So you have a situation, and they've given recommendations. So those are the 3 issues I'm going to focus on. So you have a situation of a whistleblower making allegations that they cannot substantiate with credible evidence. So it was normally regarded as hearsay. But the committee, the panel also discovers gaps in the narrations of Cyril Ramaphosa, His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa. One is that his farm manager could not corroborate the testimony of Ramaphosa before the panel. And I think for me, that's what then punched in gaps. Whereas the whistleblower had no evidence. Because the whistleblower in his narration says the handler of Ramaphosa first kept money in the apartment and he doesn't know the amount. That alone wouldn't be grave. But you cannot adduce evidence to whatever you're saying. Then later, the money allegedly was stolen from the cushions. It's known as the cushion scandal, something after sale of buffaloes. It's stolen from the cushions at the farm gate. And Ramaphosa in his response says he sold the buffaloes towards Christmas to some of his Sudanese partners, and they had not banked the money. But what comes in question is then the constitution and the anti-money laundering laws of South African anti-corruption, which warrant one not keeping a lot of money in the home. That's another gap on the side of Ramaphosa. Why keep such amounts of money in the on the farm? There was also no traceable paper evidence of the transaction, meaning it was a cash sale. A cash sale, but why don't you bank the money? So there's that. The laws on illicit cash flows. And the third issue on the side of Ramaphosa is then when money is stolen from your farm, why didn't you report? I think those are the three gaps that have tainted the image of Ramaphosa, but the committee did not have evidence. And it's on the basis of lack of evidence that the ANC committee has decided to vote against the report of the committee. But also Cyril Ramaphosa's lawyers are in the Constitutional Court challenging the report findings. I was fortunate to have visited the Constitutional Court of South Africa in 2019 and understood clearly the way it works through interface with the president of the court. It's really powerful, it's independent. I wish we could have such in Uganda, and I hope it will give an unbiased verdict on the petition.
All right. Doctor, just the four post-independence, the post-apartheid leaders of South Africa, two have resigned. Thabo Mbeki resigned under pressure from the ANC. We saw Jacob Zuma equally resigning.
Right.
Now, a third party or a third individual or a third president is under the same duress, and the allegations seem to be not very far. Abuse of public office. So I don't know, where do you see this ending? Do you think you'll end up submitting to the pressure? Because unlike the others, this time around the ANC is actually backing Ramaphosa. They say, no.
There's no, because of on the basis of lack of evidence.
Yes, well, because Thabo Mbeki's case, the ANC actually asked him to resign. But in this case, the party is with him. So how do you see this unfolding?
For starters, I want to add a fourth point, I think, to what Sarah said about Ramaphosa's conduct, which for me makes me think he should resign. The fact that he used presidential guards to recover his own private money. That's the point that we've not talked about. That when this money disappears, he dispatches his own presidential guards who are not his own people. These are not your employees. These are not your farm employees. These are state employees to go and recover the money for you. So instead of reporting to the police to recover it, you use your own guards who go and recover the money. And then at some point, there's talk of paying off the thieves, not reveal that they stole your money and you got them. There's something dubious about this. But for me, it's a picture of Uganda again. This whole thing of President Museveni, there's no decision between President Museveni and Museveni the guy, the man. They are all the same people. Museveni the man and Museveni the president are the same people. Museveni's watch tour home hosts state events. Museveni's farm in Kisozi is almost a state farm. These are his personal things. Why mix up personal property with government property?
Is
for
it
me,
so personal? I thought it was a government farm.
I don't think,
Okay.
I don't think
That's
so.
a debate for another day.
I think it's personal. So, but the difference between what is personal, what is Museveni personal, and what is not personal is basically something we wouldn't understand. But this I know for sure. Chua should be his home, but he hosts people there. You remember the thing about Zuma and also
Yes.
hosting people, improving my home. But I think
Yeah, that's
Museveni's
where
home must be improved
patronage starts,
every single day. So for me, using your guards who are allocated to you to guard you, to go chasing after money, Meanwhile, maybe even remain unguarded in that respect, if such a thing is possible, is abuse of office. So for me, abuse of office, no
But,
distinction in the state.
But Adrian, if you are a president, are you entitled to security at your properties like farm?
I don't think you should be entitled to security at your properties at the farm. Maybe if you are there.
Because you go there.
Yes, if you go there, then you go with your security. Why should we guard your own private business ventures for you? I don't think that is how it should work, at least ideally.
Okay.
But I know in Africa, you are entitled, once you are president,
It's
every
not
single
only
of yours.
Africa. Let's
Even other
share
places.
the example of Obama's grandmother in Kenya. I think she still has. It's State Bureau guards. She had them throughout to the 8 years. Because she's a member of the White House.
Yes.
She had them in Kenya.
Yes. That is if the state decides that, you know what, we are going to be guarding you because of if you are attacked and harmed. If your grandmother is attacked and harmed, then that's an attack on the president.
Yeah.
That one makes sense. But for me, you don't use those guards the way you want. Fetch my water, go do this, chase after my thieves. That's not how it works.
Okay.
Even if it gets to that point of where you can have them, the state has sent them for you. It doesn't work to that extent. So for me, that's abuse of office. And for me, resignation is why I would have wanted him to resign. Is because that, for me, shows a growing democracy. A democracy where people know that I'm not in this seat as a matter of right. But I'm in this seat because of the Constitution, and I must do the right thing by the Constitution. If I abuse my office, then the thing to do as a president is to resign and move on. It's not, you're not going to die, as of course our president wouldn't even think of resigning, but I think he think of dying in power. That's not what it should be. It's not a matter of life and death to cling on to the presidency until you drop dead. If there's something, of course, it has to be more substantiated, I agree.
And serious.
And all that.
Actually, the Constitution of South Africa demands that if you violate
Yes.
the Constitution in a serious manner.
Yes. So abuse of office, misuse of state resources
Substantial manner.
is basically substantial enough for him to resign. So instead of waiting for an impeachment to go through, of course, I think he's remaining because he knows if the ANC is backing him up, then they may never win. The IDA may never win, and the others don't have the majority to win. But for me, still that leaves a chink in his armor. It still leaves something that, you know what, we thought you were unimpeachable. We thought you were really someone who could change or turn over the fortunes of South Africa.
But where is
what has happened?
evidence?
Well, we're not a court of law, but for me, you don't have to wait for... No, the
evidence still...
The money was there in the sofas. At least no one is saying the money wasn't there. He says I got it from myself buffaloes, but the money was there in the sofas. He doesn't deny that he sent security, his own guards, presidential guards, to run after the money. He doesn't deny. So there are certain things of abuse of office that he admits. Then if you admit them, and they're not supposed to be done that way, then you're abusing the Constitution. Regardless of whether you store that, the illicit transactions and all that may be, but for me, abuse of office is something that is certainly there in that case.
All right. Whereas the ANC seems to be politically backing Cyril Ramaphosa, let's just examine the role of GS Malema's political party in all this and how it will unfold. And by this, I mean, of course, the economic freedom fighters. Because we saw them put up a very good fight on the Jacob Zuma impeachment process. They were very vocal, they were very loud. Even when
there was also evidence with the Gupta brothers.
Yes.
Yes.
So in this case,
the question of evidence, because I think as lawyers, maybe the viewers out there need to know that we are a panel of lawyers.
Maybe I'm still a law student.
Yes,
so I'm not
a lawyer in the making. I think as lawyers, we should not divert from the issue of evidence. The ANC has been very clear in really pushing their leaders to resign. The first incidence of Mbeki was in an attempt to get himself a third term. And the ANC said, no, you are diverting from our values and you must go. And he went. For him, it wasn't corruption. And Mbeki is one of the cleanest leaders. I don't even know how he thought about that. Maybe power must be too sweet. Because he would be the last person you would imagine would be such. Very dignified, a remarkable individual. For Zuma, I think his issue actually was a confirmed state capture. It was not just a one or two corruption issues. What was clear, outstanding among them was the Gupta brothers. But also he had scandals of tarmacking roads around his house and so many other issues. So it wasn't one issue. And a case of state capture was proven in the ANC structures. So the ANC from Sunday and Monday, the ANC top leadership took time off. There were many calls with the chair of ANC committee. Himself, he had called for Ramaphosa's resignation. Then Ramaphosa said, show me the evidence. I'll go. So the committee sits for 2 days and nobody shows evidence. So they said, okay, as per these findings, we don't have evidence, even as ANC, to act. And that's the basis through which they've decided to back Ramaphosa against the panel findings. So going back to your question.
Do you think EFF
Yeah,
can,
the Marema, I saw Marema calling for resignation. Where is the evidence? As a lawyer, I want to see evidence. The Constitution of South Africa is very clear that if you abuse the Constitution in a substantial, they use the word serious, but legally it means substantial. So I want to see substantial evidence of misconduct.
and there are other political maneuvers that they can use? Because if you're short of the evidence, which is a legal requirement, I agree. And there are other.
So are we then promoting mob justice? I wouldn't. I am one of the people who thinks that, when Ramaphosa was campaigning, I was like, okay, this is a wealthy man. But I know also people never get enough money. So my imagination in my simple Muntu thinking was that he's not coming into power to get money. Because he had money and he had access to if it was political influence to make money, he already had all that. He did not need that. Ramaphosa was one of the favored successors of Mandela. His accession to power was delayed. He was Mandela's chosen successor. When he was denied that role to immediately succeed Mandela, he concentrated on business.
What role did he play again in the apartheid struggle? Was he the
He
lawyer?
was the lawyer. He
He's the lawyer,
negotiated towards the end of apartheid. So when his role to immediately succeed Mandela was delayed, he concentrated on business. He became chair of Business League. So he had all the political clout to make money. It is not the issue. Our politics of peasantry, people come into power to make money. So he did not belong to that category. And he could make all the money he wanted because he had the political leverage that he needed to make money. So I would think, I tend to give him the benefit of doubt, and I want to see evidence. And if ANC has not seen evidence in their 2 days of sitting, then who am I to allege that there is evidence?
Yeah. Adrian, he who alleges, of course, must prove. That is a fundamental principle of the law.
I agree.
But I also know that there are other avenues through which you can, I don't say manufacture evidence, but you can create circumstantial evidence. I mean, and
Circumstantial evidence is allowed in court.
yes, but my concern is the political role that the EFF can play. Yes, the evidence might not be there substantially, yes, but are there other political maneuvers that they can use to create pressure so that indeed this guy, because at times evidence can actually disappear because there are smart, okay, I don't say thieves, but there are smart corrupt officials that they will, you won't find any evidence, but when the fact still remains that...
But you see, money moves with a trail. A trail of money movement. I know that the committee was trying to trace money in Namibia, but it still remained hearsay. Money, big sums of money.
Can be traced.
Yeah.
Okay. Except that this was cash that could not be traced for some reason.
But cash from where? It's withdrawn from somewhere.
All right, for me,
the political perspective of
yes,
this.
for me, it's not. I'm less inclined towards the evidence. Like again, you say that people can find ways.
You want moral conduct.
Yeah, exactly. This guy is he's a billionaire for years. He knows how to deal with money and how to play with money and how it moves and all that. But for me, those questions around why didn't you bank your $4 million? Why do you keep it in sofas, hidden in sofas? What's
but
happening?
Do we know the behavior of billionaires? How many people have money outside banks?
Well, but for him, he's a president also. As president, which kind of contact deal?
The law prohibits that.
Yes.
The South African law
So that's against the law.
that.
But for me, misuse of state resources. So for me, whether they prove this against you or not, resignation is not admission of guilt per se. Perhaps it is admission of guilt, but it's different from impeachment. This evidence process, the process they're going through of impeachment, is a process where they're going to need the evidence to be able to impeach him. But for me, on moral grounds, like you've said, he doesn't need the money. Like he's already rich enough. He has the cloud. Now he has
That's
the president
that's
of
my
South Africa.
assumption as Muntu
So,
Wawansi.
yes.
But I know so rich people have big appetite for
They
money.
could get
So
bigger
the
money.
reverse can be true.
So for me, what more does he want? What more does he want to drag? Why does he want to drag on? Maybe to be dragged through an impeachment. Now he's challenging it in the constitutional court. Hey, they don't impeach me. Why must he fight? As in, if you admit to certain points, like, you know what, this one was wrong, this one is against the law, this was against the constitution, then you have to
Please allow me ask Adrian.
So,
Sure. Feel free.
Adrian, I believe in the moral uprightness. But we need also to distinguish that from cowardice, where people say, hey, and
Let me
you
run.
jump. Then what is the basis of jumping? So, really, should we have leaders who are really scared at every noise?
not exactly at
I
every
think
noise.
doctor would make a very good defense lawyer for.
But for me, I think what the EFF should be demanding
Cyril
for.
might need your services. Because you can argue very well for Sharia.
So what the EFF should be arguing for, what the DA should be arguing for, is basically to take more responsibility. That doing something wrong, something that's against the law, do the right thing, horrible thing, and resign. So we shall wait for the evidence and where that takes us. But for me, leaders who start slowly, misusing resources, running after petty thieves, paying them off.
There's no smoke without
There's something, that whole trail of things shows there's something wrong that's going on, how he basically handled that whole situation. And for me, as a president, it should be beyond reproach.
Yeah.
Okay, but
It's not-
I think then a second question for you, Adrian. Democracy is upheld by institutions. And if men were angels, then we would not need laws.
Absolutely.
Do you believe in South Africa, in one ANC institutions, to call their people to order? They've done it twice. Do you believe again in South African institutions like the Constitutional Court to redeem and clear out the gaps where they exist?
Including their own parliament, I believe in all those institutions and they're doing their own job.
Yeah.
My focus is on the individual,
The
Ramaphosa, the
moral.
president. You, in your own moral right, why don't you do the right thing before you become Zuma with all sorts of scandals and move on? Yeah, you waiting to become Zuma because also Zuma, by the time he left, by the time the ANC also got rid of Zuma, he had compiled up a whole list of scandals. Why should we wait for 100 scandals rather than this one scandal? And the guy goes and we get someone cleaner. He also messes up, he also goes. We can always find leaders in South Africa. They have a bigger population.
There's so many. Well, we can find leaders in South Africa, but our time here is fast spent, and we need to wrap up this show.
That's for sure.
So I'll invite you to give us your last word, then I'll conclude with Doctor.
So for me, the democracy, human rights, good governance across Africa, that has been examined in Uganda, Kenya, and also South Africa, is something that is on the wane. It's something like, it has not become routine and fashionable to kind of water down all sorts of institutions, to kind of water down all sorts of processes, and also the moral uprightness we talked about is something that everyone should be upholding. From Museveni, I don't think there's anyone that's left there, but okay, from Museveni to Ruto to Ramaphosa, each one of them should be able to hold up themselves upright as our leaders who we think about and be like, these are the leaders of this country, these are the leaders who should lead us and guide us as beacons. For me, that's what I would use as a wrap up, that all of us, wherever we are, have this reflection, self-reflection that, you know what, to make democracy work, to make rights work in Africa, we need to be able to hold our institutions and our leaders to account. Higher standards than even we hold to ordinary persons.
Doctor, your last words.
I agree with Dr. Adrian Jjuko that, and for me, I'll just put it differently, that the fountain of honor is not a charitable title. You must live by the expectations of the Constitution, of the framers of that Constitution, of your country, and the people that you lead. Two is that integrity is key in governance. And that's also Jjuko's point on when it comes to Cyril Ramaphosa. Integrity is key. But for me, I would again score it and say, then if I am a promoter of rule of law, I do not want selective application of the law, either on the powerful or the weak. So it's on that same vein that I'm calling on the same standards of rule of law to be applied to Ramaphosa. And do not say you are powerful and we should not follow the rule of law. No. All details of the rule of law should apply to Ramaphosa the way they should apply to a common person. So if people are alleging that he has done something wrong, let them prove it. And he shouldn't just run because people are talking. No. On Kenya, please, you are the role models of East Africa. Don't spoil it for us. For Uganda, bring back our people.
Wow. Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah. Thank you very much, Mr. Jjuko, for spending the time to be on our show. Oh, counsel as well, right? Yeah. Thank you for spending the time to be on this week's Citizens Chat Show. Well, from us to you, we say have a lovely Friday, but also know that the festive season is here. Just be safe, be more conscious, be more security vigilant, because so many things tend to happen in this period of time. But we wish you a lovely afternoon and see you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.